Optimal minimalism.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
What if I did the opposite?
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
Tim Ferriss Show.
This podcast is brought to you by Trello. During tough times like these, one thing that brings us together, of course, is our common humanity, and another, which helps to harness that, is technology. Now, more than ever, teams must come together and work together virtually to handle challenges, opportunities, and everything in between. That's why Trello is here to help. Trello, part of Atlassian's collaborative suite, is an app with an easy-to-understand visual format and tons of features that make working with your team more functional and more fun. Teams of all shapes and sizes, and companies like Google, Fender, as in Fender guitars, and even Costco, all use Trello to collaborate and get work done. It's one of the few tools that has also made the cut with my team, and I just have a handful of folks. So it can work all the way from tiny to gigantic. With Trello, you can work with your team wherever you are, whether it's at home or in an office. And no matter what device you're using, computer, tablet, or phone, Trello syncs across all of them so you can stay up to date on all of the things your team cares about. So keep your workflow going from wherever you are with Trello. Try Trello for free and learn more at Trello.com/TFS. That's TRELLO.com/TFS. Trello.com/TFS. Check it out. This episode is brought to you by NutriBullet. I have my NutriBullet about 7 feet away from me right now. I'm going to be using it for a bunch of stuff tonight and probably tomorrow night. NutriBullet is the affordable, easy to use, easy to clean. The easy to clean part is super important. Blender that was first recommended to me by entrepreneur Noah Kagan when I interviewed him for this podcast. And specifically what I asked him was, what is the purchase that you've made in the last, say, 6 months for $100 or less that has had the greatest positive impact on your life? And his answer was the NutriBullet. NutriBullet has sold more than 60 million units worldwide. You can start to do the math on that. It's pretty freaking bonkers. And once you've used one, it's easy to understand why it became so popular. With other blenders, cleanup can be a huge pain in the ass. NutriBullet makes it really, 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 really simple. And if you're not familiar with the classic NutriBullet, it's effectively a single-serve cup that blends, and then you flip it upside down, you detach it, and you can drink it, eat it, chug it down right there. So it is intended for, at least in the classic sense, smaller portion sizes. But give me a second here. So with NutriBullet, as I mentioned, cleanup is truly hassle-free. And their signature blending process transforms whatever you might have, high-fiber veggies, nuts, seeds, fruits, of course, into silky, nutrient-dense smoothies, if that's what you like, that are easy to digest and absorb. I use them for nut butters. I use the NutriBullet for soups of different types. I use it for all sorts of stuff. Now, the engineers at NutriBullet have created a convenient and upgraded version of the NutriBullet called the NutriBullet Blender Combo. This is their most versatile device yet because it allows you to switch between single serve, as I was describing, and full size blending. It's also a bit more expensive, of course, than the classic version, but it gives you a lot more. And from smoothies and protein shakes to savory soups and dips, the NutriBullet Blender Combo does it all. And there's a recipe book that comes with it. There's all sorts of stuff that you can play with. This next-gen NutriBullet gives you everything you know and love about the classic device. Yes, I'm reading copy in this particular sentence, plus all the performance and capacity you would expect from a full-size blender. Don't settle for blenders that leave your smoothies filled with chunks or anything filled with chunks that you don't want chunks in. Get the NutriBullet Blender Combo and introduce your veggies and fruits and whatever else you might have to 1200 watts. It easily just smashes the living hell out of them and blends into whatever you would like to create. And for you, my dear listeners, NutriBullet is offering 20% off of all products on their website. To get your 20% off, just go to NutriBullet.com/Tim. That's NutriBullet, NutriBullet.com/Tim. If you don't have a NutriBullet in your kitchen, you are missing out. It does a lot in a very small package. NutriBullet.com/Tim 4 Tim, 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 Hello, boys and girls. This is Tim Ferriss, and welcome to another episode of The Tim Ferriss Show, where it is my job to deconstruct world-class performers of all different types, whether from business, science, chess. It doesn't really matter. What we're looking for are habits, routines, thought patterns, frameworks, etc., that you can hopefully ponder and test and apply in your own lives. And my guest today, and I'm going to massacre this name, but I will do my best, is Dr. Vivek Murthy. That's Murthy on Twitter, at Vivek Murthy. That's Vivek_Murthy on Facebook, Instagram, at Dr. Vivek Murthy, and vivekmurthy.com. Dr. Murthy served as the 19th Surgeon General of the United States between 2014 and 2017. As the Vice Admiral of the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps, he commanded a uniformed service of 6,600 public health officers globally. During his tenure, Dr. Murthy launched the Turn the Tide campaign, catalyzing a movement among health professionals to address the nation's opioid crisis. He also issued the first Surgeon General's report on alcohol, drugs, and health, calling for expanded access for prevention and treatment and for recognizing addiction as a chronic illness, not a character flaw. In 2017, Dr. Murthy focused his attention on chronic stress and loneliness as prevalent problems that have profound implications for health, productivity, and happiness. He has co-founded a number of organizations: Visions, an HIV/AIDS education program in India; Swasthya, a community health partnership in rural India training women as health providers and educators; software company Trial Networks; and the grassroots physicians organization Doctors for America. Since leaving government service, Dr. Murthy has continued to focus on loneliness and social connection. His brand new book is titled Together, subtitle The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. Dr. Murthy received his bachelor's degree from Harvard and his MD and MBA degrees from Yale. He completed his internal medicine residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and later joined Harvard Medical School as faculty in internal medicine. His research focused on vaccine development and later on the participation of women and minorities in clinical trials. Dr. Murthy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's great to be on with you.
I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the last handful of years. And I thought we should start with how to pronounce your name properly. And I know we had a warm-up. We had a warm-up pre-recording, but perhaps you could describe how you have trained people to say your name in the past.
I'm happy to. Well, there were many years where I just gave up and didn't correct people. But when I was in business school, I started teaching people to say my name the following way. It's spelled V-I-V-E-K, and the V-I is pronounced like the V-I in Victor, and the V-E-K is pronounced Vake, so it rhymes with lake. So that's what I used to tell people, but instead of calling me Vivek, they just called me Victor Lake for the next 2 years. So, so much for that.
Well, we have a lot that we can explore, and a lot we will explore, and I thought we could start with loneliness. And that is certainly a perennial topic. This is something that I have struggled with personally over decades, certainly struggled with as a kid. This is something that also many people are acutely struggling with because of SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 at the moment. And to place things in context, we're recording this on March 24th, 2020. Both of us are at home, and we'll have time to talk about certainly COVID-19 and so on, and we'll dive into that. But I'd like to focus on loneliness first. And let's start at the beginning. Is this a topic of interest to you because it is something personal that you have experience with, or is it from observing the impact of loneliness on health on a wider scale?
Well, Tim, my interest in this initially stemmed from my own personal experience. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, but I'll just say that I think when a lot of people are lonely, they don't realize how common it is. And they can think that it's just them, and somehow their loneliness is evidence that they're just not likable or evidence of a character flaw or maladjustment. But the reality is that there are a lot of people I came to see in later years who struggle with loneliness, and we're all around each other just in silence and often feeling a bit ashamed of how we feel. For me, the feelings of loneliness began in elementary school. I was pretty shy kid growing up. And, I wanted to hang out with other kids. It wasn't that I wanted to be alone and by myself, but I just had a hard time kind of getting conversations started and breaking in to other cliques and into the in-group. And that persisted for a long time. And I still remember going to elementary school and feeling this pit in my stomach when my parents would drop me off. And I wasn't scared about tests or teachers. I was just worried about going to the cafeteria and not knowing who to sit with. I was worried about being on the playground as the last person picked for a team, despite the fact that I was actually quite athletic and had good athletic skill. I was worried about feeling lonely. And I would wait every day until 3 o'clock when the bell rang in elementary school. And then it was this feeling of relief. I could finally go back home where I knew I was loved and where relationships were just so easy. My parents and my sister were just the best and continue to be just extraordinary, loving family members to me. But that was my first experience of loneliness. And, it's funny that how these experiences stick with you for years and years and years. Even later in life, when I was able to build beautiful friendships and feel quite secure in my relationships, I still felt sensitive to those experiences of being lonely or sensitive about being in circumstances where I might be by myself. So it's taken a while to process and work through some of those feelings.
And what does that look like for you as an adult? Is that something that you were able to compartmentalize or put on the side, for instance, for a period of time? Were you reminded of this? I'm just making this up. This isn't something you've said, but for instance, looking closely at the opioid crisis and a lot of, let's call it comorbidity with depression or other types of conditions that might be associated with perceived loneliness. How did this come to play out in your adult life?
Yeah, so it played out in two ways in my adult life. The first was in a really direct way. So as I got older, I was able to build friendships in high school. I enjoyed those friendships. I felt like I started to blossom socially in terms of becoming the person on the outside who I felt like I was on the inside. But there were still patches, in my life where I felt lonely. It was a state that was easy to fall back into. And it was a state that was self-reinforcing in a way. When I felt lonely, I would actually get down on myself. I would withdraw even further from other people, which would deepen the loneliness. But there was a second thing that was happening when I was an adult, which was that I was going through my medical training and starting to encounter patients in the clinic and in the hospital. And I trained in internal medicine, and I assumed that the people I would be seeing and caring for would have issues like diabetes or heart disease or infections like pneumonia or complications of their cancer treatment. And I certainly saw many patients with those conditions. But what I did not expect to see were so many patients who were alone. And this is how it first showed up. I began seeing patients who would be admitted to the hospital and wouldn't have anybody with them. And I would often ask, in the just routine course of taking an initial history and physical, I would ask about their social circles. Do they live alone at home? Do they have somebody that they can rely on in terms of friends or families in the area? And I was finding often that people were saying, no, there's nobody there. So that was one thing. But then when urgent situations would come up, when we would get a test result, for example, that was really concerning, that showed maybe somebody had a new diagnosis of cancer, and I would want to talk it through with them, I would often ask them, is there somebody you want us to call so that we can share this information together, so you have some support, so we can make some tough decisions together? And very often people would say, I wish there was, but there's nobody. There were even times, Tim, at the end of life, where on many occasions, it was just me and my colleagues, my fellow doctors and nurses, who were the only witnesses to people's passing away. And those really struck me deeply, because in those most important moments in life, birth, death, and the critical moments, in between when you either have success at work or have major breakups, etc., you hope that there will be people there for you, though you'll be surrounded by the people you love. But for so many of these people, there was nobody at the end. And that was a very heavy feeling that lingered with me for a long time. And so I came to see in my adult life that not only was loneliness something that continued to affect me in waves, including during the time I was Surgeon General, but it was also something that I was encountering quite commonly among the patients I cared for. Keep in mind, Tim, I had no training in how to deal with loneliness. There was